Alright, so this time I'm going to finally show you how to output this to a movie. And we're going to use Media Encoder, After Effects, and we're going to go over best practices for the file formats. The three that I use is an uncompressed MOV, which is what I would use if I was to do something for TV, and the television station would want a really high quality file, and they absolutely needed it. The best quality as it could be would be an uncompressed MOV. Most of the time you're just delivering for the internet, and that's where I would use an MP4 or a WMV. And the MP4 is more for Apple and WMV is for PC. And this MP4 is perfect for whenever you're viewing on the desktop, and it should work for your iPhone and iPad. And the PC will not work for a Mac or an Apple, and that's where MP4s come in. But for any other PC, WMVs are really good. They're small file size and they look great, and that's what we're going to do. So I have the file open that we've been working on, and this is ready to go. We want to export out as a movie. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that our queue is where we want it. So say 100 frames is what we want to render out. If the logo needs to sit there and read, you might want to go to 150, 175. And I'm going to queue this little area up. If you do not queue it up and it takes up the whole viewable edit, it's going to be really long. If you look down here, it'll be 2 minutes long, and that is way too long. So you want to adjust this render queue before you export to a movie. And right now I have it at 150, which is 5 seconds. I'm going to queue up my render queue, and you guys should know how to do that. I'm going to hit save. And going out of After Effects, I'm going to create my MOV out of After Effects. And how you do that is you can come up here, composition, add to render queue, and always use this quick key. So you have add to render queue. I'm going to do it. My render queue is already down here. By default I put it down here, and I can add it. So it might take a little bit, and it'll populate it down here. And this is what the render queue looks like. You have an ability to check a box, because you can have multiple renders of the same thing, and that's another way to drag your files into the render queue, is you literally just click and drag, and you can have multiple ones, and you can queue them up, and you can hit render and it'll just render one by one. This is the name. It says status because you need to know if it's done or not done. This one is not done, so just because you put it down here doesn't mean it'll just magically work. You have to hit this button. Before you hit that button, it says that it's in here and nothing's happening. And here's some different settings here. You have these little drop downs, and it has a lot of details in it. And that's where you can check your settings after you set them up. And here's another little drop down. This will tell you where it's going, what kind of format. We're going to change that. Only look at this to double check things to make sure I'm doing it right, but I usually don't even check those down. So this top one is render settings, and there's some blue text. Depending on what version, it may be yellow, but if you click where it says best settings, you get this pop up. The only thing I need to worry about is this quality. it's maybe at current. So if you were having trouble with your computer and it's at half res, and you check some things in your composition to make it run faster, it will render at whatever you have set. So if it comes out looking like pixelated and low quality, that's because you might be at current settings, and we want to be at best. So by default, I always come in here and just make sure it's on best, even if it's on current. I want it to ignore that and go to the best it can be. Resolution. If you look here, here's the size. This is the size that we've created from the beginning, 1920 1080. And you can set that up here, make sure it's at full, and hit OK. And I wanted to show you, sometimes people want just a quick version that's a little bit smaller. Another way to make your file smaller is to not have so many pixels. And a quick way to do that is under resolution. You can go to half, and you can see in parentheses 960 by 540. That's the half resolution of this. You can go down to a third, 640 by 360 in quarter. But I usually mess with full and half if we absolutely have to get something out quick. That's a ridiculous good quality file. But I'll normally mess with just best and full, 1920 1080. I look down here and make sure that my frame rate is correct. Right now our frame rate is 30 frames per second. So I just make sure this is correct. And I look down here too to make sure my end point is where it should be, which is 150, and that's 5 seconds. And I'm going to hit OK. So we're almost done. We have our good quality settings, and we got our formats, and you can look down here. You can do your checkbox and you see best, full, 1920 1080, start frame, end frame, duration, frame rate. So I'm going to toggle that back up and look at this. And we have outputs. It does say AVI. We haven't got into that yet, and we're going to have to change that. So I click this top one. I'm going to click this lossless one now, and I get this pop-up box. So it says format at the top. AVIs are the default to a PC, and they're horrible. They always crash and they can corrupt, and the files are huge. We are going to generate a large file, and that file is going to be a QuickTime. So with this drop down, we can see all these different types, and I'm going to pick QuickTime. And down here is you have video format. I'm going to come to format options, and when you pick QuickTime, you have a video codec, and animation is what we want. And you have all these other ones you can research and look into, but for this master file that we're doing, the good quality, it's going to be uncompressed. I'm going to pick animation, and your quality is 100. This is very similar to the JPEG quality, so I'll keep it at 100. And I'm going to leave everything else alone. You can look at the audio. It's uncompressed, so that's going to be as good quality as you could possibly get out of After Effects. And I picked QuickTime because I don't want it to just be PC only. I want it to go across both, and that's why I picked QuickTime and animation codec, and I'm going to hit OK. So now we see customs, best, and QuickTime. And we got one more thing to click on, which is where we're going to put it. If you don't click where you're going to put it, it's going to hide it somewhere. And if you do that, you can toggle this down and see where the default is. So for me, I'm going to click this. I'm in the wrong folder. I'm going to come down here, and I'm in 17, calling it rendering. Yours, you can keep it in Logo Animation 3. And I'm going to go to the deliverable folder, and I'll put a date, so it's the year, the month, and the day. And if you had multiple ones, they'd all be in order. So I'm going to double click that and leave it as is, because that's the name I wanted from the beginning. It helps to keep everything the same name. And I'm going to make sure that's not checked, because I've got my own folder. And I'm going to hit save. And then you hit render. So I'm going to do this, and I'm going to pause, and I'll show you how it turns out. Okay, so I'm done rendering. I'm going to now take a look at it. So I'll come into the deliverable folder, and I'm going to go to that date. And for this, here's my QuickTime. I'm going to open it in QuickTime, but notice this is not that long, so the file kind of isn't that large. But if this was like a 2-minute video, this would be in the gigs. So you got to be careful with this type of export. But I'm going to double click it, and that should open up QuickTime. And there is kind of an issue with these huge files. If you're not viewing it in one of these movie editing softwares, it may play back chunky. That doesn't mean it's a bad file. It just means it's so big your computer can't really play it back as real time as you would like it to. But it is a really high quality. Like, that's how big this file is. Can't even fit it on screen. But if you can't play it back, that doesn't mean it's bad. It just means put it inside of a program and then let it render or play back through the program. But it should give you a really good file that you can back up and have forever. But sometimes these files get big, and if you save your After Effects file, you can get rid of this guy and always come back and re-render it. But this is like my master. This is the file that I would give to somebody who would absolutely need the highest quality ever. Now for files that I would deliver to a client, okay, here's another tip. This file that is a QuickTime animation, I wouldn't necessarily give it to the client unless they specifically ask for it and if they paid for it. So I usually don't give this to a client at all unless somebody else has taken over and they want the good files. Then I would give them a file like this. And that's usually who asks for those files, is somebody like us, not really the client. Now to give a file to the client, I use this program called Adobe Media Encoder. They took a lot of functions out of After Effects and moved them to this program. In this program you can render Premiere and After Effects. And it just has a little bit more settings and outputs that you can use from both those programs. And it's kind of neat how this works. You can come into After Effects and you can go to Composition, and right next to Add to Render Queue, which is inside After Effects, you have an Add to Adobe Media Encoder Queue, and you have a quick key. So I have that selected. I want to click that button. And it should populate into here. And it even tells you how to do it. And my favorite is not to do that button, but to actually drag the files in here. And it might take a while. See, that took quite a bit just to get over here. So that's one way to do that. I'm going to actually delete that and show you how I do it. So I'm in After Effects. I have this open at the same time, but I just click over to After Effects and I drag the composition that I want into this Adobe Media Encoder. And I do that by clicking and dragging, come down to my taskbar, and then drag back up and then let go. It's a little bit faster. So I already have a default in here because I use this default a lot. But I'm going to show you some things in here and how to make it. So if you look at this other little program, I have my presets here, but the program comes with presets. And if you look under system presets, you have all these different things you can do. So you have audio only, broadcast, and this is where a TV station or any other very specific codec that runs on a system, they should have the codecs in here. And usually somebody will tell you, or you Google and you figure out what you need to give to these people for it to work in here. And then they should have a preset ready to go. So you have your different cameras, you have your cinema. So if you want to go to a 2K digital cinema projector, there you go. It'll convert it to 24 frames a second and get it in the format to where this digital cinema can play it. Pretty powerful. And you get devices. You have Android, you have tablets, you have the phone, and it'll port it down to that size to where it should be ready to just copy over to your phone, and you have it. You have your Apple iPads, Apple TVs, and you have Kindles, all kind of good stuff in here. TiVo, RIP to TiVo. So you got DVDs, you got Blu-rays. Of course you need a Blu-ray burner. Image sequences, you can do GIFs. You might want to look into how they do GIFs online, because you can optimize it, but you can output a GIF through here. It'll probably be huge, but you need to research. You got some default Windows formats, web video stuff, Vimeo, YouTube. It's pretty nice. I always go to Vimeo or YouTube and look at the instructions to make sure that you're doing it right, because it changes almost year to year. There's new formats and new settings that it can take, and I would do that. So they got presets already ready to go for you, but I'll show you how to make a new one. You come over here to your preset browser, you have a little plus, you can make a folder, put all your stuff in it. That's what I made here. And I'm going to hit a plus sign. It says create new. And if it doesn't pop up immediately, just give it a second. So this one I'm going to do one for Apple or Mac. It does both PC and Apple. But I'm going to do a format called H.264. You guys should know about that file format. If you go through After Effects, it wants you to do a QuickTime, and then within the QuickTime do a H.264. That is not the same thing as just a H.264. And that's what's good about this Adobe Media Encoder. It does raw H.264s, but it still will look like a QuickTime. So right now I'm going to do an underscore, so it's always on top of my presets. I'm going to say iPhone 1080 because I have a 1080 video and I want to make sure that my preset is set for that. And you come down here, that's the name of it, that's how it's going to show up when you go to pick it. And you have these different tabs down here, but just in case, you have export video and you got export audio. I want to make sure both of those are selected. If it's silent, it's because that was accidentally unchecked. Just make sure those two are checked. So you have these little tabs down here. The only thing I'm going to mess with is video and audio. So I'm going to go over to video. And my resolution's a little short, so I'm going to have to scroll with this little area. So basic settings, you got width and height, 1920 1080. Frame rate, I want 30 frames a second because this is digital. Only if you're going to film you'd want 24 or 23. We want 30. Field order, you don't have to understand it, you can Google it, but I use progressive. That is one solid frame, not interlaced, and that's what these two have to deal with. But just remember 30 progressive square pixels. NTSC, just leave it alone. That's America, that's UK. Profile, you want to just keep it as default, and mine is high and levels 4.0. And here's another important area. So right now we have CBR, which is constant bit rate, and you have a variable bit rate. Variable bit rate is kind of, it floats to where it needs to concentrate the most and compress where there's a lot of movement. But you can do a one pass or you can do a two pass. Two pass is obviously better. It'll do it once and then look at it again and make it better. So bit rate, I want VBR 2 pass, target 5, maximum bit rate 6. Just leave that fairly small. And audio, I'm leaving it as is, AAC 4800 stereo. Bit rate is 160. And all of this settings that we set up is going to be called iPhone 1080, and it's going to be saved. So here's my old stuff. I'm going to remove it so we can see. Here's our new stuff. We've saved it. We can double click it. It might take a second. Or it might not. Maybe I right click and tell it to open. That might help. And this is what we set up before. So that's good. And in order to apply it to this file that we drug over, we want to drag it over this old default preset. Whenever you drag something in, it'll just attach something to it. That doesn't mean it's right. So always come over to my presets, or one that you want, and click and drag on top to replace it. See, now it says iPhone 1080. That's our preset. And just like before, we need to tell it where it's going. So I'm going to click that, and it's close. It'll give you this folder, which I always delete later, so I'm not going to use that folder. I'm going to go to the deliverable folder, go to the date, and I'm going to let it save it right in here. Since it's an MP4, it doesn't see any other files because it's this new file. Same name, different file type. I'm going to hit save. So I did not render yet because I've got one more preset. So this one's for iPhone, and I'm going to make a new preset for PCs. I'm going to call this WMV 1080p. And under format, I'm going to come all the way down to where it says Windows Media. So I'm going to click that. I'm not going to pay attention to this. This is based on a preset, which is the system presets here. I'm going to just do custom because that's what I'm showing you guys. So I'm only going to worry about the video and audio. And here's the codec. So you can do it with the most recent media player. This is 9. They even have it in 9 advanced. If you go into a client that probably doesn't have an update, you can get comfortable doing version 8 of the Windows Media Encoder or Media Viewer. And the width, I'm going to do 1920, height 1080. Because it was at some weird default, so I'm just doing 1920. I'm unchecking that, going to 1080. Frame rate, I'm going to do 30. Field order, progressive. Aspect, square. So we're making this totally custom now. And here you have the same option. You have constant bit rate, variable bit rate. And for me, on a PC, I'm not going to do variable bit rate for this because it depends on their viewer being the most recent. The better, most recent codec, you need the most recent player. So I'm just going to do the old school constant bit rate, one pass, because it's PC people. They probably don't update their stuff. And I'm going to do a maximum bit rate of 6,000. Image quality, 100%. So that's like the JPEG image quality. You always want that good. And if you want to knock down the size, you can change this to like 4,000. I do 6 because I want it to look good. And audio, I'm not going to really mess with it. Just make sure it's pretty good. 4800. Not going to mess with anything else. And that's it for the WMV. I'm going to hit OK. And the cool thing about this Adobe Media Encoder is now that I have two, I can drag this one, and I'm not going to drag on top of that codec. I'm going to drag on top of the name, and it gives me two. I'm going to tell it where to go because it's a WMV. We just created it. This one's going in the right place, but this one is not. So I'm going to click it. Come in here, go to deliverable, go to the date, and then hit save. So now I have both of these ready to go, and all you got to do is hit play. So I'll go ahead and hit play, and I'll show you when it's done. Alright, so my renders are done, and it shows up under status. You have little check boxes, and that's how easy it is to do that. And now these guys will stay around as long as you don't move computers. You can have these in whatever movie you want to bring in. You just drag it over, and you can literally drag the presets on this, and it's ready to go. And when you're done, and we look in our deliverable folder, you can see the files in here. And look at the WMV, it's only 500K. CM Educate logo. MP4 is like 2 megabytes, and the large one is 130. So that's pretty good size. I'm going to open the WMV for you guys. And these are the two files that I would actually give to a client for deliverable. So it's going to open. It's probably going to be a little stuttery when it first opens, and then the second time it plays, it should be good. So there's the stutter, but then we play it, and it looks really good for that file size and ready to go on most PC presentations. It'll hardly give any issues, which is what you want. I'm going to close that, and I'll show you the MP4. The only thing bad about an MP4 is sometimes the colors tend to be a little dull, and if you have the eye, you could probably see it, but other than that, it's totally acceptable. And what I mean by dull is the blacks tend to not be as rich and dark as a raw file. But for the size, it's really, really affordable, and it'll play back on both Mac and PC. And ready to go for iPhones and iPads. And okay, so we did the presets for Adobe Media Encoder. There is a way to do presets inside After Effects. And you can access some default presets here, but I don't ever touch those. And you've got a thing called custom or make a template. And I clicked make a template. I'm not going to touch anything except for the name. And here's where I say _MOV. I used to do all of my presets in Media Encoder inside After Effects, and that's where I came up with the underscore. So I'm going to go to Edit, and this pops up the very familiar box, and I'm going to go from AVI to QuickTime, Format Options, Animation 100. That's all good. Audio, you got an audio panel down here. You can click Format Options, Uncompressed. Hit OK, and hit OK. Since that was what we just created, it pops up here. So let me show you. I'm going to start again. I created my preset, drag it in, make sure I'm on best, come over here, and I see my preset up on the top because I put an underscore. That was the reason for the underscore. It'll pop up on top. And I'm going to do _MOV, and if I check my settings, it's everything that I set up. Pretty good. Click on my name, make sure it's going in the right spot. We've already got one, but that's how you make a preset. Come here and make template. You can name it. Go to Edit, and see that used to be Windows Media Player down here, but for some reason they're taking it out of After Effects and putting it into Media Encoder. So that one I can delete. And my MOV is always there. It's just really quick to click and then snap it. It's done. I don't have to come in here and make sure everything is okay. But you can set up presets, and it keeps it going really fast. And that's how you make movies. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I did.
Days don't break, they fade away. Face my watch and face it, they faking it, take my pain away. Be a fatality, count my salary. Dream shattering, trunk rattling, drug dabbling, dabble or dab on a battery. In a Jeep and G when we gon' see this salary. Set a time bomb till I blow up out the Matrix in the Zion.